In this episode, we take a look at the Neat Microphone's King B2 large diaphragm condenser microphone. This entire episode is recorded with the King B2 large diaphragm condenser microphone into Sound Devices MixPre 3. That's exactly what you're hearing right now. And let's go ahead and get you some audio samples.
It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It is an old maxim of mine that when you've excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple, pickled peppers. This is without the pop filter. Peter Piper picked a peck of purple, pickled peppers. My voice has a particularly generous amount of sibilance. Sibilance, of course, is the sizzling sound you hear when someone says the letter S. Here's a sample. She sells seashells by the seashore. By the seashore, she sells seashells. As you move around a microphone, it sounds a little bit different because, of course, this microphone has a cardioid polar pattern, meaning it is sensitive on the front, less sensitive on the side, and rejects most sound from the back. So here's what it sounds like up on the front. I'll go ahead and turn it so that I'm 90 degrees off axis. This is 90 degrees off axis, so you can see what that sounds like. Now I am 180 degrees off axis. That is to say, I'm talking into the back of the microphone, and this is what you hear. Going back to 90 degrees. This is 90 degrees off axis on the other side of the microphone. And then finally, here's back on axis at 0 degrees, so that you can hear what that sounds like. This microphone is so heavy. Watch this. It's on a sound blanket that's sitting on top of this desk here, or this table. This thing is really heavy, and this is a weighted desk stand. I actually have to put this massive sandbag on the back of the stand to keep it from tipping over. So you're going to need a substantial stand for this. Let's bump the desk a little bit, bump the stand, and bump the outside of the shock mount. Here we go. The desk. Now the stand at the base. Working my way up. Now on the outer part of the shock mount. Now on the microphone and the inner part of the shock mount. Now, obviously the idea is that you would never bump the microphone itself or the inner part of the shock mount. If you happen to bump the table, the stand, or maybe the outer part, that's what you'll get. Now, I went ahead and got some samples, not only of the Neat King B2, but also the RODE NT1. And the reason I chose the NT1 from RODE is that it's a similar microphone from the standpoint that it is also a large diaphragm condenser microphone, and it also has a very good self-noise specification. Not exactly the same price. The Neat King B2 comes in at $170 US, whereas the RODE NT1 comes in at about $270 US. So $100 price difference, but from what I'm hearing, they're both actually quite similar. And for $100 less, that's pretty impressive what we're getting out of the Neat King B2. First up, the pros. The Neat King B2 is an XLR output microphone. It comes with a shock mount that we tested just a few minutes ago. For those who are looking for a first microphone, what this means with an XLR output, you can't plug this directly into your computer. You're going to need some sort of audio interface. So there are a whole bunch of those. We reviewed some. I'll go ahead and put a couple of links up here if you're needing some information on those as well. One of the things that people get very concerned about is microphones, and cheaper microphones in particular, tend to make a lot of self-noise. They make a hissing kind of sound. It's an electronic noise that's generated in the circuitry of the microphone itself. The Neat King B does very well on that front. Very little noise. not only from its specifications, but in our own practical noise floor test, we found that it did very, very well. What I do is I usually go into my basement area here, this studio, and I turn everything off, and I record some dialogue, and I also record some silence after that dialogue. I bring it into post, I loudness normalize the entire audio clip to -23 LUFS, just a standard loudness that I use every time. And the reason I choose that loudness is because I don't have to do any compression to get to that loudness normally. So we get to -23, and then I measure the silent portion of that audio clip. And what we found here is that as long as it's below -60 dB RMS max, that's usually quite good. This one did -68. And if you apply a 40 hertz high pass filter, what is one thing that this mic does is it does pick up a little bit of vibration and converts that into kind of a low frequency rumble. If you apply a high pass or a low cut filter, same thing, different names, at about 40 hertz, this microphone cleans up even more. So it is a great sounding microphone, and it is very clean in terms of self noise. This microphone is incredibly solid in terms of its build. I can't believe for $170 US that they were able to make something this chunky. And when I say chunky, what I mean is that it's kind of heavy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the cons section. It does include the pop shield that we demonstrated a little bit earlier, and it does come with a 2-year warranty. Now, a few cons, things that to keep in mind. It does tend to pick up some low frequency rumble. And so even just a regular room, just sitting on a table, nice quiet place, I was still picking up quite a bit of bass, very low frequency rumble. And what I found is if I apply a high pass filter of about 40 hertz, maybe 50 hertz, it cleans a lot of that up. So it's no problem whatsoever. It turns out that that's not something terribly unusual. I also found a similar type thing with the RODE NT1. So it's not just the King Bee that does that. You'll find in a lot of spaces you're going to get something like that. Any sort of vibration or any sort of very low frequency rumble, maybe even stuff you can't hear, may affect that overall. So just apply a high pass filter and you're good to go, either in post or in your recorder. Either are fine. The included pop shield I didn't find to be particularly effective at preventing plosives, or those sort of low frequency poo sounds that you get when you say Peter Piper picked, anything with a P, a B, sometimes a T, anything where a puff of air comes out of your mouth and goes directly into the capsule. Those types of things, this didn't do super well at that, but I think that's largely an issue of positioning the microphone. Ideally, something off to the side like this, aimed at the corner of your mouth, can work really, really well and help prevent a lot of those plosives in the first place, or you can use any variety of third-party pop filters if you prefer. The Shockmount didn't prevent all of the vibration of the table or bumping the stand from creating sort of low frequency sounds, resonances. So just be careful about that. And then finally, the overall unit with the Shockmount comes in at 2.47 pounds, basically 2.5 pounds, or 1.12 kilograms. That's a really heavy microphone. And so you're going to need a substantial stand. And you saw earlier, if I didn't use a sandbag on this weighted base desk stand, it would tip over. So you're going to need something that's pretty substantial. So you're going to want to keep that in mind as you're budgeting for something like this. You're going to need a really substantial stand as well. So overall, my impressions and recommendation, this sounds very, very similar to the RODE NT1 to me, which incidentally is one of my favorite reasonably priced XLR-based large diaphragm microphones. And it's the microphone, in fact, that I use every single day at work for my Zoom calls. And it's been a really, really solid performer. It just sounds really nice and balanced. It just is one of my favorite microphones. Just works really well. And now for $100 less, you can have something like this. Pretty impressive. And then finally, this microphone is a bit of a looker. It has a unique design. I think that's characteristic of this design team. This team originally started, if I understand correctly, blue microphones, and then they all left and created neat microphones. In any case, you get to decide for yourself whether its appearances are distracting or kind of cool, whatever you prefer. I kind of like it myself. So overall, there's a look at the neat King Bee 2. Hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. and we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.